Hello, everybody. On today's episode, I have on a staple in the spiritual community. She has been awakening for 20 plus years, and for the last several years, she's been doing Akashic record readings as well as offering multiple classes to help you achieve higher states of self awareness. She is one of the most credible people that you could find. Everybody, welcome Amy Belair to the show.
Hi, Todd. Thanks for having me. And that was such a nice intro. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for being on my podcast.
I'm glad we made it work. And especially before my babies are born or my baby is born, given what you told me before we started.
Yes, I'm very excited to have this conversation because we spoke back about 3 months ago,
Yeah, I think
a-
so.
and that was a very big start for me because I didn't even have a podcast at the time. I think I started it the month after, but it was just like such a shift in consciousness for me when we spoke last time.
It was an amazing conversation.
Yeah, for sure. I can't wait to listen back to it when I get the opportunity. So why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Well, like you said, so basically I'm all about spiritual awakening. I started awakening, I think, in earnest when I was about maybe 17 or 18. And it was a turbulent journey, as it is for a lot of us, especially back before social media when we didn't have those connections and abilities to, find a virtual community. And I got really used to suppressing it and keeping it in the closet, which was extremely uncomfortable. And I tried to fit the mold for years and years and years. And finally, after a series of events in my personal life, I just got to the point where I was like, am I allowed to swear?
Yeah.
Okay. Where I was like, fuck it. I literally can't do this anymore. It was so clear to me that I was betraying myself and my reason for being on earth, and that I couldn't wait for anybody to give me permission. I just had to face all of my fears of rejection and ridicule and all that stuff, and just start showing the world more of who I am, which meant having conversations such as these, which now I'm really used to, but at the time it really freaked me out. So I started a podcast because then I didn't have to have the camera on. It feels like you're talking out into the void, and that probably somebody will listen, but especially when you start, it could be nobody for a long
Yeah.
time. And it kind of took the pressure off, and that was really nice. And then I started a Facebook group and um, an Instagram profile that was kind of apart from my personal one that I had before. And I just let it grow. And I learned to read the Akashic records for my own reasons. And then I knew I wanted to share it with people. And now I'm just basically in a journey of letting it evolve and rather than having like a set title that I've given myself or a set service that I offer, I just let the universe speak through me of how it wants me to interact and what it wants me to bring forward. And I'm just increasingly learning how to surrender my ideas of how things should be and just let things flow through me. So I'm basically just a spiritual person who loves being part of the conversation and connecting with other people who are having fascinating experiences and hearing about their perspectives.
Well, I love all of that, and I have a few questions off of that. But I wanted to say that what you were just saying at the end, that you don't really want to box it in. That's how I feel about myself. I'm like, I can't. Like I was telling somebody, I was like, I feel like I've been on the information highway, and I don't know what exit to get off because I don't want to get off the wrong one. So I don't necessarily want to identify with, oh, I do this, because I'm ever evolving and ever changing.
Yeah, exactly. And especially like as the collective consciousness goes through this rapidly accelerating shift into basically it just feels like higher levels of expansion of what it can understand. different things are being called through us. So it's to the old paradigm of calling yourself, like, so say I think I'll probably always work in the Akashic records. It's just a field that makes sense to me. But to call myself an Akashic reader feels, I don't know, it just feels limiting now, because the universe just wants to call through whatever it wants to call through for that expansion. And I just want to be part of it. So I totally, yeah, I resonate so much with what you said. I'm not wanting to get off at the wrong exit.
Well, I think the name Akashic has such a mysterious sound to it that people tend to put it in a box of Edgar Casey when it's, so much more than that. Because I've traveled through the Akashic record, anybody can,
Yeah.
and the way that I see it is, people probably, some of the quote unquote abductions or people that get lost in national parks, I feel like this is happening, where the video game rendering ends and there's a glitch and it shutters, just like a big one of those big old billboards that is one thing, and then you move the shutters and then it's another thing. And that's what happens, and people go through our dimension to another one, and that in between one is where the Akashic records lie. And I saw that there's dots all over the field. There's like dots all around my being, and then there's dots all around every other being, and then there's dots all around the fields of everything. And you can click on one of them, and it's just like Zelda or something. You click on it, and a little bubble pops up, and you can read it.
That's amazing. I love that, because my way of conceiving of it is very similar, where it just feels like a cloud made of droplets of mist. And
Hmm.
then when you zero in on the droplets, like you can see they're little spheres. And if you go into a sphere, it opens up. And for me, it's visual. So it contains like a vignette. Usually it contains visual information, but that sounds really, really similar. Like there's just all these little parcels, these little quanta information. And yet all of them are constantly moving too. Like none of them are set in stone.
Yeah, and I love how you said clouds there, because I see the clouds, the regular clouds, in a far different way than anybody else sees them. And it was actually you. So after we spoke, you said you went on a Facebook Live and you mentioned me, and you said, I think it might be his third eye. And I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. So I started playing with the idea that, oh, that's how my third eye sees things. And it made me start to see things more and stronger and more clear, because I knew what I was seeing it through then.
I
And it
love
was, yeah, and it was you, just because I mentioned it to you, and I never thought of it the way that you mentioned it, and it just blew my mind.
that. Makes me so happy, because I'm so like, I feel so driven to help people connect with their own psychic abilities. And I genuinely believe that we are all psychic, that there's a degree to which it's gone dormant because for survival reasons, and other reasons, but also there's a degree to which it's just so normal to us, or it's just us, and we can't quite, it doesn't feel special enough, or we don't see it with the same clarity. And sometimes you just have somebody reflect it back to you, and you're like, oh, and then it just starts to unfold because suddenly your attention is going there. And I feel like psychic psychic abilities still carry such an air of like mystification around them, that they're like this magical extra big deal. And it's really just, for most people, it's just there, and they don't, but it's really subtle and they don't notice it. And then when they start to notice it, it amplifies pretty quickly. So that's exciting to hear that that's basically what happened.
Yeah, for sure. I like doing that too. I was with my mom a couple weeks ago, and I was telling her how I'm psychic. She's witnessed things that tell her that I'm psychic, and then I was telling her, I was like, "You're psychic too," and she starts telling me all these old memories she had, like, "Oh, I could tell." I could just know things if, the way that your guy's foot hit the pavement right before you stepped into the door. I could tell what your emotion was, who it was, if you were in trouble, all these different things just off of hearing our footstep. It's like everybody has it. We just don't look at it in the terms of being psychic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have like somebody else who is very into the awakening process, and she was like, I was thinking about mowing the lawn, and then my husband's mowing the lawn, and I was thinking about having pizza for dinner, and he had pizza for dinner, and it's like, she's like, oh, we're having telepathic communication. It's like, yeah, that happens all the time. People just never really interpret it that way. They
Yeah.
just they just think like, oh, it's a coincidence.
Exactly, exactly. And so like people feel this big separation from their own psychic abilities, and it's right there already. There's activations you can receive for sure. I certainly have, and there's clearings you can receive to help remove programming that maintains that veil of separation, that illusion, but ultimately like we all contain it within.
Yeah, for sure. So you do psychic activations for people, right?
Mhm.
So what would that consist of if someone was going to contact you? What's something that you could help them with in order to achieve the activation?
Yeah, so it kind of started out during my Akashic sessions, or I don't know, some point last year. I just got this set of instructions from my guides to start doing something called they call it multi-dimensional holographic matrix repatterning. And it's sort of like they showed me the whole entire holographic energy matrix that surrounds us and comprises us, and all the way into our cells and everything like that. Most of it has to do with our seven main chakras, and then I don't know, I hear that there's 21 accessory chakras, but I think I'm aware, like I've personally connected with probably about 10 to 12 of them, but I'm sure that there probably are more. We had a conversation on Soul Space about it, actually, about the Soul Star chakra and the higher transpersonal ones and the Mouth of God chakra and things like that. And so that's usually where they take me, but sometimes it's these little, they almost look like lacy energy strings that like connect different aspects of our energy field and our different the layers of our etheric body. And anyway, they get me to clear out the stuff that is in the way, and then funnel light. It's almost always light, but sometimes it comes with imagery too, or like a certain kind of spin or velocity to the energy, and a color, like has to do with wavelength and stuff like that. But they'll have me bring light in for people's different chakras or the different area that they've brought my attention to, and that seems to clear out a lot of stuff and really amplify the energies that already exist there. And just recently, even last week, so I was getting a lot of understanding about light code activations and how to bring bring in those sort of high frequency truth codes and clarity codes into, usually our chakra centers. um, and then I recently, just over this last week, received the download about how to also like go to the next level of clearing programs away. So I was, before I was more doing like people's trauma, their own personal trauma. um, but am becoming more aware of the implants, like the general implants, and it's like filters get put over top of us and over top of our psychic centers and things like that to maintain that veil of illusion. So it's all done on an energetic level, but I talk through the process of what I'm seeing and what I'm being guided to do. And then I also have included that in my most recent program that I created, which is the psychic activation course, um, where I just let myself channel out light code activations. And I have a couple of clearings that I've just created to upload and add to the course too. So that somebody, if they feel like they can't afford a whole session with me, or they feel like, or I'm having a baby or two babies, we'll see. And so if I'm unavailable for a while to do that, there's still a way to access it. And I'm thinking of uploading a few as well to like Rockfin or something like that, just to make it even more accessible to people.
So that's very interesting. So the light that you call in, is it white light? Does it depend on the chakra?
It depends on the chakra and it depends on the unique person. And it was really interesting to start channeling it for the collective, or for, like, for example, the people in the psychic activation course. Um, it really just was like letting myself go into a semi trance. And but I feel like it's the record keepers, like, I think I'm always in the Akashic field, even if I don't formally go into it when I'm tuning into somebody. Um, and it's the record keepers more so than my specific guides, because I can kind of feel the difference. And they just basically, it's like they're doing it and I'm just speaking it out loud.
Okay. Okay, that's interesting. I can see things the way that you're describing, but I have to go into a trance that's deeper than I can communicate in, because there's different layers that I can go to, but I have to be uh, in order for me to see, I can't speak. You know, it's
Yeah.
kind of goes one or the other for me.
Yeah, I totally get that. In fact, I was sharing with one of my private clients this week. She was telling me about an experience she had going into somebody else's Akashic records, and was feeling a little bit like not sure if it was just her imagination, which is what most of us tend to think.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, I completely resonate with everything you said. Like, I get the same information when I tap into this person's field. Um, and I said, though, that, like, just so you know, when I'm doing a reading, I can only communicate like probably at most 30% of it, because it's so huge and indescribable that,
Mhm.
like, it I think probably people would say that I'm a good speaker, but I feel like I fall short all the time. I'm struggling so hard to find the exact words to transmit the information that's coming through. And so much of it is just so far beyond words
Mhm.
that I can't. So I feel the same thing, like what I'm seeing, but I can barely communicate what I'm actually seeing.
Right, because you're seeing, you're feeling, you're having all your senses go off at once, and words are very limiting in that how many seconds or how many words can I get in 1 second? You know, there's
Yeah.
no way, and it's a constant thing. It never stops when you're there. So it's like this second would take me 10 seconds to describe, and then, so every second, if it takes you 10 seconds to describe, there's no way that you could possibly do very much of either or. If you're trying to talk too much, then you can't stay because then you're too conscious, and if you're too far there, you can't really say anything because you're just in the moment more. So it's a
Yeah.
very fine line, and it's difficult, even though anybody can do it, it is a very difficult practice that you do, and it takes years and years of, really hard work.
Yeah, it is. You're exactly right. And I also feel like, I mean, I speak French, but I've never tried doing an Akashic reading in French. But I don't really speak any other languages with any kind of fluency, so I can only address the English language here. But the English language is so warped. It's so hijacked and warped. So even there, it feels so clunky to try and articulate this information. And which I think is why I'm not a light language channeler at this point. I've never channeled light language, but I imagine that's why light language is coming through for people, because yeah, it wants to move through the throat chakra. It wants to vibrate out into the 3D, but it doesn't fit in English. So it has to come through in some other series of sounds that, our conscious brain doesn't necessarily understand. But nonetheless probably carries a very real and specific frequency.
So is this something that we would just hear in our regular everyday, process, or is it something you have to tune into?
Light language?
Yeah, I've never heard of this.
Oh, okay. So it's kind of a thing that some people do. Like I said, I haven't felt like genuinely compelled to do it. And I'll just wait and see if I ever do. And if I do, I'll do it. And if I don't, then it's not for me, and that's okay. But it's almost like sounds like a series of clicks and rolling language. It almost sounds a little bit Gaelic, but it's just sounds usually that's, and somebody doesn't always know what they're saying. They just kind of go into a bit of a trance, and it,
Just like speaking in tongues, like that
yeah,
one Christian church?
yeah,
Or
it's kind of like that. But it seems to be like the association that people make is like with the different star beings and star races. So almost like it's our more genuine language, or our more like our true language or something like that. um but I don't know for sure. That's mostly my understanding, but I do think that there's an aspect of psychic experiences that do want to get anchored into the 3D through our body, through our vocal cords. um I mean, it all does because it changes our energy signature, but I think that's why light language has come up, because there's just like just some things just don't fit into English, but it still wants to be communicated through sound vibration.
That's very interesting, because been learning Spanish, uh, on my Duolingo app, and now I'm learning Greek, and I started that like 3 weeks ago, and I'll get into that in a second. But this light language thing that you're talking about, it's I guess divine timing is that I've been in meditation, I've been trying to get myself to hear every language and try to speak every language,
Hmm.
but to activate my energy centers in my brain. And this morning, I physically felt a wire connect from each ear straight into my brain, and it said 57 different plugs were plugged into my brain that I can now start to understand 57 different languages that I'll at some point in time, if I keep on doing this, that I'll be able to hear all those different languages in my brain in English, and I'll be able to speak English, and it'll just come out. Well, that's another process for the throat, but if I keep going on it, then I'll be able to just speak one language, and other people will hear my words in their language.
Yeah, that's amazing, and I it just resonates with me so much that that's actually how I believe that's how people used to communicate too. Because if you think about like all, at times prior to technology, and I kind of, if you can feel my hesitation, it's because I also kind of think that history is all bullshit. But nonetheless, I do believe that there were genuinely times where people from different continents and different cultures with completely different language structures would come into contact with each other and communicate, and be able to communicate with a degree of efficiency that's hard to understand from our perspective because we get so locked into our own languages. But I think that's it, is like communication isn't what we think it is. It's actually not language based, it's a transmission of vibrational frequencies. And there are aspects of our cognition, but also our psychic selves that can receive that vibrational frequency and decode it, whether it comes through sounds that they're familiar with or not.
Yeah, I feel like I do that with the animals too, because I just talk to the animals in English and they listen to me. All the dogs, they know what I'm saying. The cat, and it's funny, we're hosting somebody the last week or so, and she's like, "Yeah, I talk to the cat just like a dog, and she just listens." I was like, "Yeah, it's because she's used to being talked to in an energetic way. So when you speak to her now, she knows the deal."
That's
Uh,
awesome.
yeah, but oh, the Greek. So it's funny that that the way Greek is because you can it sounds like English. When you if you go listen to words, they very much sound like English words. But if you look at the spellings of these words, it's all messed up. Like the V's make N sounds, uh the Y or the Y's make a G sound. It's like somebody purposely created the English language in order to confuse you from one of the original languages, which was ancient Greek. And it's just, I mean, when I look at it, I'm like, oh, English was purposely done to us so that we couldn't understand Greek and Latin and all those ancient languages.
I totally believe that. I feel the same way about the Gaelic languages, like they're an original language as well, the different Gaelic language families. And then I can only begin to imagine the what actually gets transmitted through indigenous languages. But yeah, it's interesting because the English, exactly, the English phonetic sounds don't make sense as they correspond to the same symbols in other languages. It's like, why? It's weird. I think you're right. I think it's to break up our ability to access true information.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And you were saying about history, they do have accounts of the Vikings and Native Americans meeting, indigenous people meeting before Christopher Columbus came over, and that they actually spoke English and they knew white people, and that they were actually waiting on white people with boats to come on that exact day.
Wow.
And you know, there's a whole mythology with that, with Quetzalcoatl actually being like the Antichrist, and the feathered serpent that gave them information, and he's the one that said that these white people were going to come, and then they came and got conquered by the white people. So history doesn't, uh, because the it's occult information. The history doesn't reflect that Quetzalcoatl is the Antichrist. Uh,
Right.
so it's these days when people they go around in Mexico has a lot of different Quetzalcoatl things. People are worshiping it because they are just misled in order to believe the lies. Yeah, that's a little tangent. I don't know why I got off on that, but it felt relevant. But what the great thing was, that you have a very Aphrodite feel to you. You got the white tank top on. Your hair it appears like how ancient Greece would wear it. You have all the necklaces, and you're pregnant.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a pregnancy. It's really interesting to experience having two, like, so my personality and my energy in my body, and then the energy of another being or two beings. We shall see. Um, because I definitely feel the changes that they bring forward. It's just very interesting. So I think I think it has to do with the pregnancy for sure.
Yeah. Well, so you're very in tune with your body. So is this pregnancy, and you've been getting more in tune with your body for a long time now. Is this pregnancy different than the others in terms of how you're interpreting what you're feeling?
Well, of course they're all different for sure. But I think so this one was, all my pregnancies were very magical. I am so fortunate to be the mother to extremely, I don't know, I don't want to call them advanced souls because that's a very comparative sort of concept or hierarchical, but they just have so much clarity. They have activated me on levels that, continue every day. This one is a little bit unique in its magicalness insofar as I I really thought it was not going to happen, but I always felt another pregnancy in my field, and my husband was like, we're not having any more kids. and and so I had to do a lot of work to let it go. And it took a long time. It was a big struggle. And it's one of the sort of pain points in my human experience. And yet I knew that if I had another pregnancy, my ideal would be to get pregnant at the end of September, beginning of October, and have a late June, early July due date, because that's when my son Killian was born. So he was born on June 29th, in 2 days. And it just, for me, I always felt like I would love to have a little cancer baby, even though he was like he was our little cancer baby, but I wanted a little cancer baby like alive with us. And it just happened in the most magical, aligned, manifested way, where it really required deep surrender from me and just releasing all of my efforts to micromanage timing. And and so I feel like this pregnancy is a little bit extra magical. And because of that, and also because though I'm so much happier, like I'm living from a state of authenticity that I wasn't living from before, that it makes it easier to tune into it. When I was pregnant with my daughter, I was still trying to midwife and like force myself through that, to complete that program and complete that path, because I thought I had to. And it was like, not, it was terrible. So, that really, when I think when you're, it feels like it was a betrayal of self. And when you're betraying yourself, you also have to disconnect from yourself in order to maintain it. So her pregnancy was still really beautiful, but this one, I think I'm just available to experience all the magic in a much more lucid and aware way.
And is Killian, he was your firstborn,
Second born.
secondborn? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. And he was the one that passed away.
Okay. So then this would kind of be, so this is your pregnancy now was your idea before you got pregnant of the time area that you would want to get pregnant and then you would want to have the child around. And, here we are 2 days from that day. And, that's an amazing thing.
Yeah, and it involved no orchestration. Like I had truly just let it go. I, really chose to respect that my husband didn't felt he didn't want any more children, and to not make that a point of contention between us, and to just be very thankful for what I had. And sort of, it's like I put my wish out into the universe and then had to like do deep, deep, deep surrender, and like actually surrender. And it was hard. It was really hard. It took months to deepen into that surrender. But by the time this pregnancy came to be, it was completely spontaneous. It wasn't planned. I wasn't micromanaging anything. Um, and so it feels extra magical, and it really reinforced my understanding of that, the importance of that surrender in manifestation.
Yeah, well, that's how it works. When we're trying to plan everything, God is like, "All right, you think you know? Go ahead,
Yeah,
do
right.
what you want to do."
Yeah. Come
Yeah,
talk to me later when it kind of isn't exactly what you thought it was going to be.
right,
Yeah.
right. So that's amazing. That manifestation of you receiving what you asked for, and when you said you've got the right amount of surrender. I mean, that's a big thing that you went through. A lot of people have gone through similar types of situations where you lose a young child, or maybe even before they're born, or maybe they're born premature and don't survive all that long. That's a very tough process to get through. And, I just want to say to you, I haven't gone in the same as far as you have with how painful it was for you. I don't want to compare our pain level, but I mean, I feel for you that was a very traumatic thing, and for you to be where you are today with your understanding of everything, I mean, that's such a far distance that you've come, and you're very commendable to be where you are and who you are today.
Thank you very much. And I feel like that is the gift that he gave me in exchange for that experience. Is it was just a huge, I was already on an awakening path, but man, was that ever an up level. And my actual greatest fear genuinely was losing a child, and then
Mm.
I lived through it, and to come through on the other side and be able to fully experience joy nonetheless, it was like, I don't know, it was profoundly liberating to realize, like, oh, we can experience our greatest fears and realize that actually everything's totally okay. And that also doesn't take away from the pain of it, but just that actually everything's fine.
Wow, that's amazing. So, how did you do any regular practices? Because if there's somebody out there now that maybe just had a infant pass away, what were some things that you did in your immediate life to get you from maybe getting when you're getting that feeling of I'm stuck on the couch, I don't want to move. You
Hmm.
know, what were some things that you did to get over to get to the next phase of your process?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So for me, um, first I let myself laugh. So we my husband and I got into Arrested Development at the time, and Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which were both new shows to me. And I would sort of like, I would binge watch them, but not, by binge watch, I mean like 3 or 4 episodes in a row or something like that. And I would let myself laugh, which sounds stupid, but when you're grieving so heavily, it can feel like you're not allowed to be happy ever again. And when you catch yourself being happy, it's almost feels like, I don't know, there's a voice that wanted to come in and be like, how dare you, you're not allowed to be happy. And I just caught that every time, and I was like, no, yes, you have to be, you have to be. And it helped that I already have another son too, so I knew, that I had to be, for him I had to let myself have access to happiness. And then that progressed into listening to Abraham Hicks and the Positive Head podcast, and just trying to listen to things that kept my mood up when I could, and let myself be in the absolute blackest depths of grief, though, when that's what was happening. And then my husband introduced me to the YouTube channel Spirit Science, which I had never heard of before. And I watched the episode on crystals, and I was like, oh, I want to play with crystals. And I let myself develop my intuition through that. I just let myself be called to them. And then I connected with the Akashic Records. I did a Reiki attunement, and I just practiced my psychic abilities every day. And that was really important because that's what helped me. Like, I was already getting messages from him, so I had that added incentive. It wasn't just like a hobby, it was like, this is real, he's still here, this is what I have to do to stay connected with him. And it really helped, though, because it also helped lift my perspective up out of the 3D so much. So I feel like I really walk between both worlds, where I still live in the 3D and still feel the pain and still have the human experience of it. It's not really an illusion. It really is my experience, but I can see it from a higher perspective too. So I don't feel, I don't know, as dense about it. And it was just, that was really my daily practice, was just letting myself be intuitively guided to the next thing that helped me to feel just a little bit better about being alive. And letting myself develop my psychic abilities, because I hadn't done that before. Like, I always kind of just defaulted on like thinking that that kind of shit made me like a hippie in other people's eyes, and like really suppressing myself, and it's kind of like I was in so much pain that I didn't really give a shit about anybody's opinions at that time. And I was like, this is what makes me feel better. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm spending my time and my money on. And everybody can, you know, go do what they want with their opinions. And I think ultimately what that all boils down to was being willing to be present with myself in my experience, moment to moment, however it looked. So if it meant like having days in a row where I couldn't get off the couch and I was just absolutely heartbroken, then that's how it was. And if it meant days where I felt inspired to connect and practice in the Akashic field and things like that, then that's what I would do. It was just being present with it.
That's a very good technique to have because a lot of people they aren't and not just for this situation, but for most situations, is they're not present in their what they're feeling, and they're trying to mask what they're feeling. And sometimes you do need the mask of allowing yourself to laugh, like you said,
Mhm.
because you do get to a point where you're grieving, and you start to feel shame and guilt. Like, should I? Why am I happy? And like I don't deserve to be happy. And people, yeah, and people that it eats away at them for so long when they just get into that kind of, I don't know, that kind of mindset that just tells you you're not worthy. And
Yeah.
and then a lot of people, they take it as if someone's to say, like if you were to say, I learned a lesson from what happened to me, and you say that to someone else who may be stuck in the three, doesn't have the higher thinking that you, and you say, oh, you have a lesson that you have to learn, and there, someone might take that as, oh, I'm a bad person. I did something so horrible that this had to happen to me. It's like that's not what that means. That there is a lesson to be learned, and it doesn't mean that you did anything to trigger that lesson. It just means that uh, that was an experience for you for a specific reason.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, that happened where I also went to a monthly bereavement group, an infant and pregnancy loss bereavement group, and got really close with the people who were there. And one month, the moderator didn't really have any ideas leading up to the meeting of like the topic of discussion. So she emailed us all and asked if any of us had any topics. And I said that I would love to talk about the gifts that my son gave me. And she thought that was a really great idea. So she brought it up, and it was so interesting. Almost everybody in the group took tremendous offense to that. Like nobody was mad at me. She didn't tell anybody that it was my topic. And they weren't really mad at her, but it was just that this big pain point within everybody, that they took it to mean that there was something that they had done to deserve this. And that was interesting for me to realize, because I felt like, oh well, my son was just such a gift. I Of course I would want to have him with me for his whole life, but that's just not how it works, right? That wasn't mine to control. But he is nonetheless a gift, and I would never go back and erase his existence to spare myself that experience, because I got so much love along with all the pain. And it was just interesting to realize that not everybody could sort of like move between those perspectives fluidly. But I think it's just the way that things like that are framed, right? I don't think they don't have the ability. I think it's just exactly like you said, like there's this way that it gets interpreted by our minds that it means that we're somehow character deficient, and we needed to have this experience in order to improve ourselves. But it's more just like life is full of gifts. Every experience we have offers us so much towards the expansion of our understanding of who we are and what this whole human thing is. And that some of the gifts are, they just feel amazing and beautiful start to finish, and some of them come along with really difficult emotions. But our emotions aren't our enemy. They aren't our enemy. They actually don't have any power over us apart from the power that we give them. But they're still there. They feel very visceral, very intense, but they don't hold any power over us, and they actually they move through us pretty quickly when we don't resist them.
Yeah, and I think that it's meant for every human to be broken, to broken in a sense that uh, something happens to you to uh, make you come alive in spiritually speaking, that it's something so traumatic happens to you, and it doesn't happen to everybody, but I'd say at least 90% of people have such a traumatic event occur to them that they are then broken in some sense. Like you have an emotional break, a nervous breakdown, a mental breakdown. People can classify it all these different ways. And what ends up happening is just like you, I feel that most people probably do in this situation connect with their child, whether it's through a dream or thoughts or whatever, and they think that there's something wrong with them, that they're imagining it, and
Mhm.
that I need to take medicine to put this down. I can't have this come up. People are going to think I'm crazy. I need to give me the Xanax, give me whatever else so that I don't feel this, so I'm not hearing this. I need to la la la, I don't hear you, like people run from it because society tells them that that's crazy, that oh,
Yeah.
you go to a mental institution. I mean, that's a thing, is a mental institution. Hell, like that should not be a thing. Uh, but it's people uh, people aren't led to understand themselves on a conscience level, that they are led to believe that they are just physical beings and anything that you can't perceive outside of your five senses is weird and crazy and you need it taken out of you. They in the 70s they were cutting people's brains out because they had these abilities. Uh and you have all these different mental institutions all around the place, all around the world, and who knows what's happening, but we definitely know that they're being experimented on, and it always comes out 20 years after a place gets shut down or this place has been in operation for 50 years, and oh my God, can you believe what they've been doing? And they've been getting funding from the state and the federal and from this big company and that big company and like the place in Canada, you find 750 uh, bodies, unmarked graves in a residential school. And it's like, what is actually going on when we're all having the same types of traumatic events happen to us and we get to a breaking point, and that breaking point either sends us to a spiritual awakening, and it's like the most beautiful thing ever, or people try fighting it down with drugs, and we have people who don't want you to wake up spiritually, so they will then purposely keep you down and do things to you because, and even with some of the good therapists and psychiatrists and all that, that whole study, that they're good people, but they're led to believe life is their five senses, so they come to the wrong conclusion because they aren't including all of the information. So then they're coming to a clinical understanding, like logically speaking, yes, it's all true what they're saying, but they're leaving out at least half of the equation. So then therefore their understanding is faulty and it's just a theory based on a theory.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you 100%. And that's exactly what, when people will reach out to me and say that they don't believe that they're psychic, or they have a really hard time experiencing that. And like, the collective human consciousness carries so much trauma around our psychic abilities, that you don't have to have had a personal experience of trauma to be traumatized. They go dormant for survival, for real, because it has not been safe, because people get horribly punished, experimented on, killed, medicated, mislabeled, mistreated, all these things, for receiving and interpreting information beyond the five senses, like you said. Which, and it makes no sense, I mean, to me, logically, because consciousness feels so obvious to me that conscious energy is infinite. So it doesn't all just squeeze into our five senses and that's it. Like we know that about ourselves. We know that there's, you know, there's light along the electromagnetic spectrum that our eyes can't see, that the visible light spectrum is like a tiny sliver in a much bigger spectrum, and that spectrum surely goes on infinitely. It's just the limitations of our instruments to be able to measure at the boundaries of either extreme that we have. We know we don't hear frequencies that are used for dog whistles. Like, we know that there's a ton of information outside of what our five senses can interpret. So it's it's just like such a massive psyop that's happened to us. And it's been a trauma and torture based psyop to scare the bejeebs out of us into only believing in what comes through our five senses, and everything else is crazy. And in order to be a normal person and function in society and be safe, I have to narrow myself into this tiny little box, and that's all I can even let myself conceive of, because otherwise I'm not safe. Like, that's a really real factor for almost all people alive right now.
Yeah, it's the guilt and shame of society, and that's the only reason that society becomes a society, a city, becomes that way is because people have to conform to living a certain way, and they have to be beaten into it, and they have to be shamed and guilted into thinking that you have to live this way. So then you're making decisions based upon not being shamed or guilted. But once you free yourself from that and you're like, I don't give a fuck what people think about me, then you're like, oh, okay, now you feel like, okay, like I'm different. Okay, that's cool. Like I don't care. I'm different. And then like for me, I've embraced my difference and I see that it helps me embrace everybody else for being so different. You know, last year I went through, which a lot of people did, going through the conspiracy theories, and I got into conspiracy theories through ancient civilizations and spirituality. So I got there through the back door, and I only got into it because I was picking up stuff in meditation that I was then finding out a week or 2 weeks later in 3D life on Twitter and on whatever, you know? And so I was like, oh, this is all aligning. Okay. And then it started like just blowing down the barriers that I had put up, like everything that I once thought was real. Once I blew all them down, I still had up the structures that society has where you have a uniform think that everyone has to think like you. You have to make sure that you do this for them because they need to be like you. I still had that structure inside of me. And once I got once Biden was sworn in and that structure fell, it was so freeing for me because even though I was quote unquote awake, spiritually awake, it was like, yeah, it's, if I am to compare it to actually waking up, it was like, yeah, the first 5 seconds when I'm still yawning, that's what I was
Right.
last year.
Yeah, where you're still like, you got crusties in your eyes and you're kind
Yeah.
of still like, you know, 45% in the weird dream world. Yeah, totally. And I just love that you shared that, because there is no real like ultimate delineation between being awake and asleep. It's just more and more and more and more and more awake. And I think that's exactly what you're sort of talking about. Like, that's the gift of those traumatic events we experience. They offer us the ego death, which is really just the death of the limiting constructs that we have been functioning by, that actually have nothing to do with our true blueprint of what we are capable of and what this environment really has to offer us and what beautiful synergistic magic comes when we can tune into it. But we're all, so heavily programmed. And last year was a massive awakening for me too. Like I think about it, I'm like, well, I guess I started awakening like when I was 2, and then then there was this period where I felt normal, came back on like me around 16, then amped up at 18, and then blah 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 blah. But it's all just more and more layers of me being like, oh, 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 oh. It's great. And I don't think anybody has the ultimate I don't know. I mean, maybe that's not true, but I think of most of the souls incarnated in human form right now, we don't have the ultimate awakened state. It's just more and more and more awakening as we are available to it. And that's why our traumas are, they're intense and they're so hard, and I would never say otherwise. And there's a whole life offers a whole cornucopia of options of shit to break you down, but you only ever find more of yourself through the
Mm.
process if you can be present with it. There's just only ever more of us.
Yeah, it's the slingshot effect. The deeper the wound, the higher it can propel you.
Yeah.
And, and I mean, you get hit with them all the time. Like you said, you get hit with little ones
Hmm.
throughout your. We do it to ourselves because we want to conform to society. So we get a job and we have certain things that we want to upkeep. And so we do the little things to ourselves. And I feel like a lot of people get stuck in those little ones and they don't have too many big ones to propel them forward. And so it's very foreign to them for someone to be so connected to God when for someone who has never been through something so traumatic that it would bring them to God, or that they were never raised in a way that they had an understanding of God outside of the 3D concept of Christianity, that there's some man who's judging you and making bad things happen to you uh, because you're a bad person. So someone who has that understanding, who they, you know, in all terms of success, the way they would measure success, that they have maybe a happy life, and they have a decent house, and they have the vehicles, and they have a decent job. And then they look at someone like me who went to prison and was a drug addict and had all these different bad things happen to him. So I did it to myself, but all those bad things, and now who I am today, they look at me like, oh, he's just crazy. He's been crazy then, and he's crazy now, and
Mm.
it's because they never had the slingshot effect to propel them. They never went to the deep, dark
Mhm.
depths, and now they're not into the higher way of living because they've always stayed right in that middle frequency.
Mhm. Exactly. That's exactly it. And I think a lot of people, I want to say most, but how do I actually know? I haven't surveyed everybody. But it appears to me that most people, that's their aim, is to stay in that middle frequency because it feels safer and more comfortable. But it's and there's nothing wrong with that. They're totally, that's the beauty of free will. They get to do that if they want.
Mm.
But it just sucks when it's like, because of all the trauma programming we've all been through, and that they just don't realize how much amazing richness is available to them, and how strong they are, how strong we all are. That like we survive so much, and it's not even just surviving. It's like we experience and integrate and transform and alchemize so much. And there's just, yeah, there's just always more magic available.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm becoming more magical all the time. I feel like everything just aligns so perfectly. My life is a big synchronicity. Uh, you know, everything is just so synchronistic with me anymore. How about with you? Do you get a lot of synchronicities?
Yeah, my phone is full of my phone photo album is full of screenshots of um synchronistic numbers. I see them all the time. Things like meetings with people line up. Manifestations are happening so fast. And I think that's the result. But I also think that there's just something going on with like the collective consciousness accelerating too, that it feels to me like all of this stuff is ramping up for, it's available to all people. Just some people are willing to play with it, and others are like, no, normal, normal. But yeah, there's so much magic happening. I loved when you were talking about in your meditation and the languages and the whatever you described, the wires or the two lines connecting, and 52 um, things being activated for language understanding. That's what the matrix repatternings feel like. Like, it's so hard to describe. It's so unique for every person in every session, but it's like that, like hooking together things that need to be hooked together, removing things that, aren't there. I think it's really cool that you just do that on your own for yourself in your own meditation practice.
Yeah, and I'm fairly conscious when I'm doing it too. So I've been doing that type of stuff, not as detailed as that one. That was new for me, but I've been doing that since my awakening process began 2 years ago, and I had an interview with Amy Spicer, and she taught me a new way. And so when you were telling me your way, I saw your way under like was a one layer under. So it's just helping me understand it more and more. So what she's told me was to look at everything like graph paper, graph paper with the
Yep.
little grids. She said, imagine the human as a graph paper. And she said each of those grids represents something. So the way I interpret it is that I can now slide out each of the grids and I can see if there's something in there. It'll be a dark blob, and that I can just pull that blob out. But when I pull that blob out, then there's like all these wires that looks like wires were fried. Like if,
Yes.
yeah, like your headphones, if they get blown out and there's little wires everywhere, that's exactly what it looks like.
That's
And
what I see too. Yeah.
okay, so when you were telling me yours, I saw the grid on the outside, but I saw your like the little spaghetti lines just inside the grid, and it's like, oh, she's working in this part, and while the other Amy, she was working in that part, and I was like, oh, you guys just telling me, and I could see you seeing it in your third eye. I could then see it was a blue background, and it was like spaghetti strings all over the person's body, and
That's so cool. And I have to tell you, oh my gosh. Okay. So this is so exciting. So I in at the end of December, I got this set of instructions at the solstice that I was supposed to channel these transmissions called the priestess codes to activate people carrying the priestess archetype. And I showed up to do them. It was very scary and stressful because I had never done anything like that before, and I had no idea what was going to come through. The stuff that came through was like absolutely mind blowing. And one of the things, it covered all the 7 main chakras as well as some of the other ones and a whole bunch of other stuff too. It was 8 transmissions. One of the things that came through about the third eye was that we have been trained to use our throat chakra for communication, but that's never what it was intended for. The throat chakra, as I recall, because I was in a trance when I did these transmissions, so I don't remember all of it super clearly, but it's on one hand, you are supposed to make noise through it, but it's for the purposes of manifestation. So like I said, it's altering the vibration in this 3D realm through your own ability to produce sound. It's also a purge to release negative trapped energy or to amplify positive energy that you want to, energize. But it's not meant to be used for communication the way that we use it, that actually we're telepathic, which I knew. But what I didn't know is that we are clairvoyantly telepathic with each other through a webbed network of energy that interconnects us through our third eyes. So the way that you just described seeing what I was seeing is the way that we are actually designed to work, that we wouldn't even necessarily need to be using words. We just, in our most authentic expression of the blueprint we actually carry and are coded with, where we have these like light connections between our third eyes, and it allows us to experience the point of view of the other, and we get to actually bypass words altogether. So it was really cool that we just actually had that
Oh,
experience.
I have that all the time. I just don't tell people about it because it'll freak them out.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're operating at least to that extent, and I'm sure a lot of others, by your divine original blueprint, not the blueprint that has been overlaid to corrupt us.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've gotten rid of so much. I listen to different podcasts all the time. Like the other day I was listening to the Know Thyself podcast, and they're telling, describing what the spiritual alchemists, what they do, and I'm like, oh, that's me. And I can listen to something about Buddhism. I'm like, oh, that's me. And something about like agnostic Christianity from back in the day. I'm like, oh, I'm doing that. And it's like I just learn about myself through the universe. The universe is just reflecting me. And I know that everybody has this, that everything and everyone's a reflection of you, but the way that I interpret it anymore, and maybe I know that the reflector personality thinks that they're different than everybody else, so maybe that's why I think that I'm different. Maybe it is just the same as everybody else, but the way that I interpret anymore is I just become the universe, and I can go from a higher perspective. I can see uh, from the point of view as I'm a giant watching down, watching myself or watching other characters move about. And I can go even higher than that, and then I can become the entire universe. And I am hearing what someone's about to say to me before they say it because I am that person.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I'm just sending my consciousness through my body into the universe and hearing what they have to say, then coming back to me, and then they actually say it to me. And so I know the true intentions behind everybody, and it is a frustrating thing because when people lie to me, it brings out this visceral reaction, and I mean, I like do not lie to me. Like that's the one thing that I have to get over is when someone lies to me, it's a switch. It's like I go from being a very loving person to all of a sudden like, oh, give me my broadsword, we got a battle.
That's so funny. Yeah, it's like there's a, I wonder if it's like a past life piece or something of like just like feeling a very,
I think it's a
very
current life
personal
thing. I think
occurrence
it's my
thing.
mission is to essentially kill the father of all lies, which is Satan, and it's that's just the term that it's used. Anybody listening, it's not necessarily the Christianity
Space.
terminology, but yeah, it's just the like lies do something to me because I can feel when I can't lie myself. I can feel the vibrational
Yeah,
frequency that it leaves, and even if I say something and then I find out later on that uh I was incorrect, then I'll go back and tell that person like, "Oh, no, I was wrong when I said this earlier. I meant to say this," because I have to that frequency's in me that if I know that I said something incorrect, it's not quite the live frequency, but it leads there, and I have to clear it out so that I don't have that lower vibrational frequency in me anymore.
yeah. I totally know what you mean. I think for you it's super amplified because you're a reflector. I really do. I think that the reflector personality is a different. I mean, we know that they are, right? But I believe that, especially, I know you had Rebecca Weiner on your podcast recently, and yeah, her reading that I did with her totally blew my mind. I didn't realize she was a reflector, but now I'm like, oh, that's why that was such a unique reading. And I've never experienced anything like that since. I got so much clarity and information through that
Oh, wow.
session. So I definitely think that reflectors are uniquely open. Um, mhm. But but back to what you were saying about the vibration of truth versus the vibration of untruth. I definitely feel that now too. And it's funny because when I was a little kid, I used to lie a lot. That was probably my biggest
I was damn good at it.
yeah, me too. Well, that was the thing. I was so freaking good at it. And I kind of like had this strategy that I was like, well, even if I get busted in a lie, I'll just never admit it. And there's like, all I have to do is never, ever, ever admit it, stick to my story, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. That was my thinking. So I was really, really familiar with the vibration of lying. And then at some point in my early adulthood, it just, I think it was as I started to awaken, it just shifted. And I was like, I can't carry this frequency. And of course, it took a lot of years of navigating social interactions and being okay with being more and more and more truthful, right? Because sometimes you lie because you feel like you should, or it's the right thing to do, or you're protecting another person, or they're not open and receptive to the truth. But that was another thing that came through the priestess codes too, is that actually humans in our original blueprint, we can't lie to each other, because just as you were describing the way that you experience communication with people, it's like that. It's in such real time. It's like faster than the speed of light. It's just so instantaneous, the connection in with another person and knowing their motivations. And like when all of our chakra centers are unblocked, we just lock in with each other. And so we just know, we just feel the vibration of another person and their intentions, and on so many different levels that we can't, there is no deception among us. So deception isn't really a human thing, although we've adopted the behavior.
Yeah, and you know, as a reflector, I can feel when I'm communicating with somebody. I am completely, because I'm so open and I'm so clear. Like I've cleared myself out very intensely, and I can feel their emotions. So when someone's speaking to me in whatever manner they're speaking to me, I just develop what they're speaking, and I'm just better at it than them. So I'm just going, you know, if you're going to yell at me, I'm going to be a better yeller. You know, if you're going to be angry, I'm more angry than you are, because I'm taking in theirs and adding in mine. So it's no matter what level someone gets, if someone wants to be really happy, then I'm going to be more happy. It's just, it
Wow.
just yeah, it works out that way. And I feel like sometimes I might be telling myself these excuses, like if say my daughter is being mean to me, and then I'm mean back to her, and I'm like, well, you know, if you weren't mean to me, I would have been mean to you. And then I catch myself, and I'm like, no matter what they do, you still have to be in control. You can just reflect back the goodness that's in them, not the part of them that they're giving you. You can actually access the part of them that you want to bring out, and you can make them reflect you. And I do that sometimes when I catch myself, but it's not the easiest, because if I am getting upset, it's because somebody is uh, being it's mostly from lying, but if someone is being very untruthful or being just completely disrespectful, that's the two things that really get me, is the disrespect and the untruthfulness.
Hmm.
So it's very, you know, it gets me in this situation where I can then clear out when I do recognize it, and I stop myself, which then stops them from getting worse into the situation, that I can filter out, yeah, in a positive way, the negative energy that was there.
That's really interesting. The, just sort of hearing the way that you, it sounds like on one hand learning that you're a reflector really helped you to like understand the way that you interact with other people and life better, but
Mhm.
it also, there's also a piece where you're like, oh, okay, but I still have the responsibility of like figuring out how to drive this car, kind of like this particular
Yeah.
make and model. Yeah.
Right, because I with me, I can just perpetuate karma, or I can cycle it through me and end it. You know, that with everybody, And that's another part of my human design is the left cross of separation,
Hmm.
and that they're there for clearing karma. So, it's very important for me to recognize, and it's so if I'm having a heated discussion with my mom, or say it starts as a nice conversation and then it get develops into a heated conversation, you, I have to stop myself, and I still am saying the way that I'm talking is emotional. It sounds emotional, but it's actually I'm saying the words that I want to convey, uh, but that gets to a point where now nobody is going to do it's going to do no good because I'm conveying the words to somebody who has no idea what the meaning is because they're so emotional, and I can feel how emotional they are by how emotional I am. So there's no point in me conveying a mental message when someone's in an emotional state. And it helps me back away and be like, okay, you be you. I'm just going to love you for being you. And I'm not going to do anything to change you because you're meant to be you and you're going to go through your own process on your own time. And me feeling this way isn't going to help anybody. So that helped me big time by letting go of the need to help somebody who didn't want help.
Yeah, that which I think is like, isn't that such an important thing for us to all learn? And collectively, I think we're being given so many opportunities to learn it, but it's not an obvious lesson for a lot of people. But really, yeah, exactly. We can't help somebody who doesn't want to be helped, and especially under really heatedly emotional circumstances. That can just can't. There's a point where you just can't break through it.
Yeah, and it helped me. So then I'll go back like in meditation, or maybe I'll just close my eyes in the moment and I'll just do some, snipping. I'll get some scissors. I'll get out some kind of like I don't even know what the weapon's called, but it's one of those axes that's on a chain and you just swing it around and you're just cutting shit off. Like I do that rather than like argue with somebody. I'll just like call in light and I'll squeeze them. I'll have the consciousness squeeze them
Mm.
until the bad stuff pops off. And then, they'll physically let it out in some sense in the next hour, 2 hours, whatever it is. But I don't have to deal with it. They're just going to have to deal with it themselves. But, in order to help them get to where they want to be, they need to do it themselves. So I just kind of pop them open and let them go at it.
That's such an interesting description.
I do it a lot, but and it's not that I don't know that I should be doing it. I feel like I should be doing it when I do it, or else I wouldn't be. But then when I reflect on it with my ego self, I'm like, well, maybe they're not meant to be. But then my spirit higher self is like, well, if I've done it, then it's meant to be that way. I don't do anything that's not meant to be. So if I have the capability of freeing someone by just popping them off like that, then I do it.
And also though that like they still have the ability on an energetic level, even if they don't know that you're doing it, to reject it, right? Like
Yeah,
it's kind
because
of
they
like
it won't take.
exactly. It's kind of like
Yeah.
sending somebody like healing or positive light. If you don't have their permission and they're not open to it, you go for it. Send it. Send all the positive light that you want. They just won't receive it because that's their free will decision. And I think it probably goes the same in that direction too. That
Yeah,
you can't impose energetically on them. You're just
right.
offering them a venting pop off opportunity if they are open to it on an energetic subconscious level.
Well, I haven't had it where they haven't popped off, but it's not necessarily that they're going to learn from it. Is
Yeah.
that I'm just giving them, supplying them with some relief in the moment, and it might come out in tears, it might come out in yelling, it might come out in exercise, it might come out in all sorts of different ways, but it might they might not ever learn the lesson because they had it done for them, or not for them, but it wasn't a natural way of learning. But some people, they do need that extra little help in order to see, they're being pushed down so much that you can pop them open a little bit, and then they have breathing room, and then they can go from there. So that's what I mostly try doing with everybody. Is just allowing them to do what they're going to do, but just helping them get there a little bit, because I see that they're, shrouded in darkness for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know where you're from? Do you know, like, do you connect with any starseed lineages?
I have not checked into that, but I've always gone Arcturian strongly as like the number one, but I've also gone Syrian and Lyran.
Those are the three that I feel too. Yeah.
Yeah, so you know the star seeds much better than I do. So what do those actually mean?
Well, I mean, I still, I'm leaning into it ever more, but I still feel hesitant about it because I can feel gaps in my own understanding. And there's such a trend around it where I think my hesitation comes in with the piece where I can feel how much people just want to feel special, which of course we do because we are. But then we sometimes latch on to labels that for that reason, and then it's not really actually helpful. But what I do feel is there are a number of star lineages that I can't pick up a name because I don't think it has any, like, it hasn't entered our popular lexicon. I feel so Lyran to me feels like an energy that really matches like yellow, gold, white. It's really advanced. And I mean, I'll probably only talk about the advanced ones anyway, but it's very advanced, very old civilization, has to do with feline energy, although I don't really know how that manifests in terms of being like humanoid now. But it has a strong leadership energy, but that doesn't necessarily mean showy, boasty leadership. It's just like the ability to hold in your field a following. And again, it's not, you could be the quietest leader in the world, but people just kind of, when they're feeling lost, they look to you for uh, clarity or direction. That's what I mean with the leadership energy. Um, and a very strong sense of like, oh yeah, we've been through this before. we've we've been through this whole thing before. Um, the Arcturians feel very, very, very advanced, very intellectual. It's more of a masculine energy, but not a very balanced masculine, exalted, divine masculine polarity, insofar as the heart is completely integrated, but it isn't the main. It's almost like they function in geometry and energy patterns and
Mm.
sound waves and higher rather than emotion frequency. So the Arcturian people that I know of, they understand emotion because they've integrated all that on an evolutionary perspective within their own soul experience. But they can sometimes forget, or they don't necessarily connect with it in such an impassioned way as other star groups, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's really making sense. Like, they make real, my son is Arcturian, my oldest one, and he's never going to be a judge because he just doesn't follow that path, but he would make an amazing judge because he can just see all of the pieces. He can appreciate all the emotions at play, and yet they don't affect him.
That's
So
how I am.
other people's emotions don't throw him off his course. Which is really cool because, for example, like if I'm feeling emotional, which doesn't happen very often, but like if my mom, if I'm having a mom guilt thing come up, he's just like, that's yours. Like, I love you. It's yours. I'm going to go keep doing my thing while you sort through your emotions. And, but he's very respectful about it. He doesn't feel any need to rebel. It's not a threat to him. He just can really clearly sense where his emotional boundaries are and somebody else's are. And then the Syrian people. So I feel 3 Syrian groups. One of them is I'm less familiar with, and they're more like water beings. And they kind of remind me of like, they're just very peaceful, very harmonic. I think that's where a lot of our cetaceans on Earth come from. The ones that I'm more familiar with and I encounter way more frequently, I would associate with Sirius A, and they are architects. They're like, it's so hard to describe. So they have a world that is more similar to ours in physicality, but it's not as lush, it's not as plant rich. It has a lot of beautiful architecture. It's really associated with ancient Egypt and ancient Atlantis, and the seeding of those civilizations and humans on Earth. And they have a really, really high sense of order. I guess that's when I'm saying architecture. Like, that's what I mean, like precise, elegant, beautiful, well thought out design, beautiful, beautiful buildings, although they aren't physical in the way that we understand physicality, but they nonetheless are based in like deliberate manifested creation, and a lot of order, a lot of truth. They operate from a place of intellect, but it's again heart integrated. But it's not quite as advancedly integrated as the Arcturian approach, I guess.
So, do you have a feel of which one's the strongest in me?
I think it's the Lyran. I think it's the Lyran. That was the first one that came through, and then it was the one I was compelled to start talking about first. And I think it is that I've been through all of this, the leadership part, and the sort of, I think as you were talking about like helping to like basically pop off the compression that people are experiencing so they can have a relief and a release. That was what made me ask you, because I was like, oh, that's from somewhere else. That's an understanding of energy that was cultivated in a different incarnation experience or series of experiences. The understanding of like how we can vent that energy, we can just pressurize it and then vent it, and it allows for new clarity to come in, that even if they didn't completely go through that process on their own fully organically without assistance, the clarity that comes through is still for them, and it's available for them after that emotional blockage passes.
So I feel like that I'm just getting this now is that the Sirius A was correct. That's when you got that point, my guide shook my head yes for me, and that when I say I struggle with it, that's the serious part is the Syrian part is telling me no, just let them be, but the Lyran part is taking over and be like, no, I'm going to help, and the Arcturian part's like, I can see both of your angles, and the Lyran's right.
That's awesome. So there's like 3 selves in one.
Yeah, and I really felt that before you even said this. I see 111 a lot, and the one time Jen Rodriguez, she posted something about the numbers, and I picked up. I was like, "Are you a one life path?" And she said, "Yeah." And I was like, "So when you see 1111 or 111, that means that 3 of those 4 lives or 3 lives, whichever it is, are all combined into one, and you're all doing the same thing at the same time." And I see 111 all the time, and I'm a one life path.
That's really cool. I've been trying to understand the repeating number sequences myself, because literally yesterday, like, I was just going through a regular day, and in fact I didn't feel amazing because it was super humid, it was pouring rain, and like I said before we started the recording, it turns out I'm a workaholic because I love what I do so much. So I was trying to just like take the day off yesterday and chill out, and feeling very antsy, like I don't know what to do with myself. But yesterday I saw 10, 10, 11, 11, 12, 12, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4, 5, 5, 5. And then I always see 717 on my phone. And it just like pops up, right? Like somebody will text
Me
me at
too.
717, or I'll just turn it on.
717. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? I don't know. The only thing I can think of is that just like I'm in a slipstream of flow consciousness, that there's no resistance, and so things are just lining up really synchronistically. But that's really interesting. I love that interpretation, that like if you're a one life path and you're seeing 111 or 1111, that it's like in that moment all of your one selves
They're all
are,
aligning.
yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, yeah, it was super cool. And yeah, maybe it's not true for everybody. Maybe it was just true for Jen, but I picked it up right there and then in that moment. But I wanted to go back to the Lyran thing you were talking about, because I don't know if you remember some of the stories I was telling you about my cat
Yeah.
when we talked.
Samara.
So yeah, so we switched places. One time I was tripping balls, and her and I changed consciousnesses with her. I realized she was me in a past lifetime, and I was both her and I at the same time. And I told the story in one of the last episodes here. I forget which one it was, but it was me, human me, looked over and saw cat me just running around. She was running back and forth, and human me said, "Relax, you're just a cat." And then I was cat me, and I was like, "Oh shit, I'm a cat again." I was like, "Fuck." But it was all happening at once, but I was both characters, and it was very much like Eddie Murphy and the Clumps, that I was just one character telling the other one, but the other one wasn't really there. You know, it was only there in my mind and physicality. I could see it, but there was no consciousness in it. So it was, it was very eye-opening, that experience for me. And now when you say Lyran, there was a little cat in a little Jetson-esque UFO. You remember the Jetsons?
Yes.
The little vehicles they had? Well, it was like that, how it was a little plate and then a thing came over. So that cat was chasing my cat, and I cleared that thing away. When I first got my cat, I cleared that thing away, and as soon as I did, that's when my cat came up to me for the first time, and she rubbed up against me and laid on my lap, because that thing was chasing her all around.
Wow.
So yeah, and I see feline beings all the time in the clouds. I sent you the pictures
Yep.
on Soul Space, and this guy James, what's his last name? He's out of Washington State. James, I forget. He has a ranch out there, and the East Eddy Ranch, and
Okay.
he has communicated with 17th dimensional lion beings, that they're the leaders of everybody. They're the gate protectors, and that's me. That's the part of me that is me, the Lyran in me. And I've gotten a bunch of times that I'm a gatekeeper. So I
Hmm.
thought I was Lucifer for a little while because I was a gatekeeper, and I thought I was Jesus for a little while because I was a gatekeeper on the opposite end. And it just turns out that like I'm just all of them. But it was that lion energy that led me to know that I'm a gatekeeper.
It also makes me think of the Oracle gatekeepers from the Neverending Story. I don't remember if they looked like lion beings or not, because it's been a long time since I've watched it.
I'll
But
have to watch it.
that same energy is what comes through. Have you ever seen the Neverending Story?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I
Yeah.
was thinking about rewatching it the other day.
So you know when Atreyu has to go through these gates and there's these oracles, and if you don't pass the test and answer the questions, then they'll like laser from their eyes and kill you because
I don't remember
they're gatekeepers. Anyway, so there's this mirror, and that's one of the tests is that you look in the mirror, and most men, I think was how it was presented, that was only men that were going on these quests, um, wouldn't get past that test because it drove them insane, because they would see the truth of who they are rather than who they believe themselves to be. And that energy kind of comes through with you too, in that gatekeeping sense of like,
that. And I am a mirror.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think I should rewatch that movie because I started thinking about it because saw the movie Wish Dragon. Did you ever see that?
No, but it reminds me of the luck dragon.
Okay. Well, yeah, the Wish Dragon, I guess it's the same concept. I don't know the Luck Dragon, but it was actually a pretty good movie. It was a little animated one, and the dragon reminded me of the white dog dragon, whatever the flying beast is in the Neverending Story, because that all leads me back to what I was saying with Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, because that's what I've seen Satan as a serpent with a it's a seven-headed, ten-horned uh, being, it's like a dragon being, and it just has all these different heads, and the seven heads all have different dominion over different realms, and Satan has dominion over the earth, and Satan is red in the blueprint world, in the astral world. You know, where I saw Jesus is green, I saw this serpent, feathered serpent with the bears of a claw, with the mouth of a lion, just exactly as it's described in the Bible. And it has a red blueprint instead of being blue or green
Hmm.
or maybe an uplifting color. It was red. And he roared right in my face. I think I told you actually on your show, but it was so amazing. So when you just said the never ending story, it just reminded me again of all the feathered serpents that live in our atmosphere, and we call them like Wi-Fi. We call it microwaves and
Right.
X-rays and oxygen, but it's actually just other beings flowing through the entire way.
That's super interesting. And it makes me think of neutrinos too, because they just like that. Yeah. I don't know. Neutrinos are just so interesting because they don't interact with us. So they're just like flowing through us at all times. And it makes me think that
What are neutrinos? I never heard of that.
they're subatomic particles that they're called neutrinos because they don't have an electrical charge.
Hmm.
And so they're just smaller than a proton or a neutron. I think they're maybe the same size as an electron. I think an electron is actually a subatomic particle, but an electron has a negative charge, which is why it orbits the nucleus of the positively charged nucleus of the atom. But neutrinos don't have a charge, so they're just measurably flowing through all matter on Earth,
Hmm.
including us at all times.
Okay, I'll have to look into that. Yeah, I love learning little things like that because it does help when, there's a scientific understanding of things that I'm just picking up on meditation, like all the things Dr. Joe Dispenza he talks about. Like I learned about that through meditation, and then like after a year, like I hear about him, and my girlfriend's like, "Oh, you should watch it." I'm like, "Oh, okay," and I watch it, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, this is exactly what I've been talking about." So I love little nuggets like that when there's scientific information to back up my wild and crazy claims.
Yeah.
So this has been a great conversation. Do you got time for two questions here?
Sure.
Okay. So you are a very psychic lady who is a workaholic, apparently. As and you're very connected spiritually speaking. I'm sure that you're always turned on the way that I'm always turned on, and not sexually speaking. Anyone listening to like spiritually, that
Yeah.
we're always in that other world.
Yes.
Uh, so how do you ground yourself? What is the best method when you get too astral, too into the 4D? What is your best method of coming back to 3D?
Hmm. That's a really good question. I don't even actually know. I think I honestly trained myself to do it by learning how to drive and being a mother and being a midwife, because all of those things really require you to like switch your attention and switch it quickly and stay grounded. Like I I failed my first two driving tests because I was like, 12 feet above the car. And the the driving instructor was like, you need to like be on earth to drive. And I was like, oh. And so I just started watching, good drivers that I was with and being like, oh, and bringing myself down to the earth plane. And then I'm actually a good driver and I have driven a lot over my life. And I think that I just trained myself. So now it doesn't feel so hard. And I think I've just gotten good at walking in both 3D and higher dimensions, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I did today. So in the mornings after I meditate, if I have a really powerful meditation, I'm stuck in 4D for some time. And when I get to work, if I do something physical, all of a sudden it's okay. When I'm driving, I'm still kind of a little, I don't want to say spacey, but I'm a driver for a career, so that's my work. That's my flow state is driving. So I'm still in the 4D, but when I'm do something physical, it helps bring me down. And then this morning, I had a really powerful meditation, and right after my meditation, I wanted to exercise, and I knew our interview was coming up, so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go straight from meditation to working out. And at first, I was dragging along. I was out on the punching bag, and it was such a drag for me. It took me like I did 50 jumping jacks. It felt like it took me 2 minutes, where it usually takes me like 10 seconds. And then as I'm doing the workout, I'm getting through it. I'm starting to realize, okay, now I'm in the now moment more and more, and I was able to bring myself back in very quickly from how spacey I felt at the initial moment I was finished meditating.
Yeah, it really is just about coming back into your body, isn't it? I guess sometimes too, I'll just give myself an orgasm if I'm really feeling like super spaced out, because that just brings it right back in. But midwifing required me to be very data focused, very, very, very like in the moment, because I had all the onus of the responsibility on me for somebody's labor, for example. So it didn't matter if I was getting a bunch of information through my crown chakra. I had to like stay on the earth plane and focused on bodies. So I think that's, yeah, I think it helped because I used to struggle with it a lot and I don't really anymore now that you asked the question. I think that's probably what happened. I just trained myself.
Yeah, yeah, I think I'd get used to it too, like I was saying, but I'm trying to ask all my different guests how they ground themselves, because I want to be in the 3D more, because I know I'm here purposely to do certain things. And like when you were asking about the Starseed stuff, like I don't ever pick up on anything like that really in meditation. I don't pick up on specific names of where I'm getting the information from. And I think that's because that would just draw my attention away from the 3D physical.
Yeah, that is exactly, you just articulated my general hesitation of talking about it too much, is that part is like, but we're here. We're supposed to be here. That's why we're
Right.
here.
Right. And that's what I find is like, okay, what can I do here? And the more information I learn, the more I can then bring myself to a point where I understand how, like Ned Flanders will take, for example, it's just a cartoon character, how he can be so loving and really probably be one of those types of people that never knew anything spiritual because they've always just been that way.
Yeah.
and how they could live in this world and just, be in a cookie cutter suburb, working a job and doing this, and never have the thought that this isn't the right place because they're where I am without the information of, oh, this place is, uh, an illusion that they're trapping you. They don't know that part of it. And it's like, oh, I can relate to them because of my experiences. It's just, it helps me understand everything. Like, oh, I didn't need to actually trip balls to do all this. I mean, I guess I did because what tripping balls made me do was chase that love feeling, that
Yeah.
love that you get from it. I chased it to the point that I started doing everything in my 3D physical life to bring me that love because I knew that love existed and I wanted it and I figured out how to get it. And and how to get it is to be in the 3D world, is to be a positive, loving person. The more love and positivity you give off, the more you get back. And it really helped me uh, learn all those different things.
That's beautiful.
Uh, and what are your relaxation activities? What is something you like doing to maybe dull your mind down a bit? Maybe something you indulge in that you're like, maybe I shouldn't, but it helps me. Like you were saying, Brooklyn Nine-Nine and the other show earlier. Do you typically watch different things like that to relax?
Shows got ruined for me last year. I was actually just trying to find one last night, and I just can't. Yeah, the entertainment content and the information content that's being created right now, apart from podcasts, I find really challenging because they're so laced with triggers and predictive programming and all kinds of stuff. But I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I also really, this is, I mean, so overused, but really I just love to be out in nature. I love to go for walks in the woods, and I love to go to the beach. And I feel like, especially because I love working, so I'm with the computer so much and being creative, if I go and do that, like, I might not even notice how tightly wound I get. And then if I go do that, then it really, really, it's like all the aerosols, like the smells from the trees and the earth, and like the sun hitting the soil and the rocks and everything, and the smell of the water and all the visuals. It just like instantly seems to, and then especially if I'm near water and I can hear like a rushing river or the waves, it just like, I don't know, it reprograms and rewires my brain. I
It's
think it
like
just
my
resets.
background.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Uh, yeah, I like going to the beach, and I was never a fan of the beach until just recently. Well, I've been unprogramming myself from all the things that I didn't want in life, and I went through on Father's Day. I went through a struggle of thought that I didn't know what I wanted in life. Like I didn't have any direction. I just knew what I didn't want. That's what I've been realizing. My awakening was I've just come to the understanding of all the things that I didn't want. And of course, I've acquired things that I wanted along the way. But at this point, it's like, what do I want? And, I was just thinking real hard on it. And I forget where I was just going with that.
Don't you
Tot
hate that?
Yeah, just totally blanked out, uh, about relaxation. I forget.
The
I forget.
beach?
Yes, the beach, thank you. So I think that now I like the beach because me and my daughter, when we go there, I always have a good time with her. And
Yeah.
I think that I always associated the beach with one memory, maybe not one memory, but just one type of memory, one type of feeling. And then when I had that amazing experience with my daughter several times because she loves the beach, so she forces me to take her. Then I was like, oh, okay, I'm programming in myself things that I do like, and now I like to go to the beach. And my girlfriend and I and her aunt went on Friday to this new beach, and it was amazing. There was like nobody around, but it was super windy, and there's super wavy, and the water was perfect, but it was just like there was nobody in any distance of us, and it was just so peaceful, and we all just fell asleep on the beach for like an hour and a half. That was so awesome. So I'm learning, what I actually do, like the relaxation activities that I do, like in the beach, is definitely has become one of them.
And that's a really good point that you made about reprogramming ourselves. Uh, that as much as we've received a lot of programming, we can repattern and reprogram ourselves to have those new associations and find what we actually enjoy.
One thing about the TV shows is I got into at the so I'm not really into watching TV or anything now, but if anyone's looking for something to watch, if someone's a TV watcher, the Marvel superhero TV shows are uh, are awesome because then you can relate to the characters of and you can watch the show from a point of, oh, I can get this superpower, like watching Luke Cage and there's a couple different ones. I forget what the names of them are, but that's something that I used to like watching before I watched them all.
Maybe I'll try that actually.
Yeah, and what's the one with the blind guy, Daredevil? That's a really good episode or show. Punisher. Punisher is very violent, so if you're not into violence, that might not be the one for you.
Yeah, that's the other thing right now is um, I have that extra filter to put on because with pregnancy, every time I have a child, I become more and more porous and like, yeah, the violence and suffering like really hit me on a level that I, I don't really want to feel. So yeah, I have to weed out those ones, but I bet that there are some that I can find for sure. And it makes me think of some of those old comic book based movies too that I've seen before, but not in a long time. That would probably be fun to revisit.
Yeah, and I liked watching different series like maybe The Lord of the Rings you could watch or, just those fantasy things because now I look at those things as truth and I'm like, "Huh, I wonder what history was really like. Let me go put on Harry Potter." Something like that.
Totally. Or like the Dark Crystal, the TV series, actually, the Netflix series, that one I was like, I watched that last year with my son. And I was like, oh, so this is a documentary. I see.
Yeah, aren't they all? Yeah, Stranger Things,
Yeah.
I think they're all documentaries or I don't know. What are thoughts anyway? How do people come up with new ideas, Knowing what we know that there is no new information. It all exists here, always has, always will, you know, you start to understand like maybe those people were fine-tuned to receive that particular information so that they could put it out to the public so that these certain people could see it and realize that this is a dream.
Yeah. I totally think that's how it works.
Yeah. For sure. So one final question for you. Now, with all of your Akashic readings, all of your spiritual knowledge, what is the reason, the overwhelming reason, if there is one, that you think humanity exists and what a general purpose for all of us being here is?
I think humanity exists as I think that we're powerful creator beings. I don't think we're the only creator beings, but we are extensions of God consciousness, which is such a tiny mouthful to summarize such a massive concept that is even bigger than what I can truly understand. To experience itself evolving and transforming and creating and manifesting in all moments across a whole spectrum of um, like choices and polarity. I think that's really why we're here, is to be representations of God consciousness interacting, having chemical interactions and choosing from infinite options of what's available and evolving the totality consciousness that it actually is.
That is perfectly said. The way that uh, I mean, I don't know if it's correct. That's just what I've gotten too, you know. So I feel that what you just said was perfect. Is that so? The way that I got it was that the earth is self and heaven is love, and that we go from heaven to earth in order to find self-love. And it's the imaginary separation of the void between the words self and love is quote unquote space. That
Mm.
that's the space in between the two. But there is no space. That everything is one. We just are disillusioned and to thinking that we are separate because we have to, in order to find ourselves, we have to, if we're in a bubble, we have to push the edge of the bubble as far as it can go in order for us to see that we aren't different, that we are everybody, we are all one.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. When I got that, I was actually listening to Healing with Nicole, uh, when her episode, The Void. And when I heard her talk about the void, it was just my third eye just went and showed me like, oh, the void between self and love, earth and heaven. The void is space, you know. It was just showed me that real quick and it was like, ta, you know.
Yeah. Right? It comes in a split second. You're like, oh.
Yeah, yeah, my mind's blown and she's like sitting there talking about something that has nothing to do with what triggered it, but somehow it, you know, just the whole environment from what I'm listening to, the emotions and the mental state and spiritual state, it all just leads to this moment of profound knowledge happening. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Um, so, do you have anything else you would like to say to the audience before we leave here?
Just that you're super psychic, you're super powerful. Be kind and gentle with yourself as you deprogram, because we all have been under the influence of really intense programming, but that you are more powerful than any of it, any of the programming, any of the toxins in our environment, any implants, anything that you've received. Exactly, it's the space, that void is the illusion. We are actually God and we have access to it all, and you have access to it all. You're important here, and your authenticity is the gift that we're all waiting to receive.
That is beautiful. Do you want to let our audience know where they can find you and how they can interact with you?
Sure. So I have a podcast called Third Eye Awakening, and it's full of really cool conversations. I had a conversation with Todd 3 months ago, which is eventually going to come up. I gave them all to my editor, so she's picking and choosing the order. Um, I have a Facebook group called Soul Space. If you're not part of it, it's a beautiful community, very interactive, full of like beautiful, beautiful souls. Um, and then you can find me on Instagram. I think I had to change it because my handle was like heavily shadow banned for some reason. So it's Amy.the North Star now. But if you look me up as Amy Belair, you'll find me. And I have a website. It's amybelair.com. And it's in like a state of general construction, but there's stuff there. So you can find, when I start doing readings again, it will go up there. And I also have some courses and programs available. And I'm kind of always running live things because I can't help myself. I love interacting with people. So
Well, and all this information will be in the show notes. I'll make it all links so you can just click right on it so anybody listening. But it is weird how you get so shadow banned on Facebook and Instagram when you're not sharing anything. You know, typically you get conspiracy theories are automatically shadow banned. Then it's like alternative medicine, and then it's like alternative history, and you're not offering any of that, and
I
you're just
know, I know.
or alternative science. You're just offering, you know, how you can help yourself, and your podcast is amazing, and it's like, why are you shadow banned?
It's really weird. I have no idea. I think though that it's like just generally like maybe the eye of Sauron was like, don't tell people that they're psychic and give them tools to open it up, but who knows? It's probably just a weird algorithm bot that picked up on some keywords that I said, and
Yeah,
who
something.
knows?
But I feel that it's probably, ultimately, it's God, holding you back from reaching certain people because they're not ready to hear you yet, and if they don't shadow ban you, you'll because you're so, intelligent and so articulate that you can reach so many different people if by just one of your lives that you do, 20, 30 minutes, whatever, and just the way you speak, you can connect with so many different people, and that God's like, they're not ready for you just yet.
God's like, chill a little bit. We're just gonna have to tamper with this a little bit. Keep talking to the ones that are ready, but we're gonna hide some of this.
Yeah, because I feel like your show that when before we even spoke, I got this, and then after I joined the Soul Space group, it just made perfect sense that you are this hub that, like, if you would just imagine space, that we're out in space and we're at like a Rick and Morty space cafe, and like that's you. You're the owner of the cafe, and everyone's just stopping in and hanging out for a good time real quick, and it's uh, that's how I see it. That there's so many different beautiful creators and intelligent people in soul space, and it's just this beautiful place to go to, and I love hanging out in the chat there. I'm always trying to assist people when they ask questions. I typically once a day, like when I get home from work, I'll be like, oh, did anyone post any questions? And then I'll go in there and I'll try to give an answer if I can.
Yeah, I love your participation there. You're like an unofficial like admin or moderator. You get to the questions. Sometimes I can't get to them for a few days just because of the schedule I allow myself to fill up with, and I feel like your answers are so well received and so helpful to people.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. And I think that you and I are on a very similar frequency,
Mhm.
vibrational pattern because, I see you doing things, and I'm doing them too. And I'm like, she doesn't know that I'm doing this at the same time she's doing it. And it's just like, uh, you'll come out with information like when the one time you came out on a live and you were talking about the grays, and I had gotten similar information right around the same time, and it's like, oh, we're just picking up on the same wavelength.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's fun when we connect this way, because it's like even just the confirmation of the stuff I got through the priestess codes, which you haven't listened to. You don't have any access to that.
Right.
And just to hear it confirmed is like, yeah, yeah, we're all like, there's a whole bunch of us here that are on this mission, and it's just coming through like each of us intended for different audiences, and there's some overlap, but we're all doing the same work.
Yeah. Well, this was an amazing conversation. And again, thank you so, so much for coming on here. And it was well, I kind of had the idea already, but it was your uh, invite or having me on your show that made me want to, okay, this is what I want to do. And then I did it. I started it.
Yay. Well, I'm so glad that you reached out to me in the first place and that we get to be in each other's orbits now. And I'm so thankful for the opportunity to come be on your show and to talk with you again. And I honestly hope that this is just like the second of many conversations. It probably is.
I'm sure it will be. And this, we're in an evolutionary period, and this is the last thing I want to leave the audience with. And you were touching on this earlier, how you said you started awakening at 2 and then 16, then 18, and then so on and so on. And the way that I see time, or not necessarily time, but when we unlock new things, is that life is just a big combination lock. And if you could imagine the 26 letters of the alphabet that you have to hit a certain combination from point A to point Z. And when you do the right things, you have A, and you always have A. And then you do more things, and you have B, and then you always have A and B. And you go all the way up, and that's what the psychic abilities are. And we probably lie somewhere around like Q, R, S, and T. Like
Yeah.
somewhere right in there is where we are. But that's not to say that someone who's at A can't get to Z before we get there. They might already have
Totally.
They might have B through Z already uh, the right combination, but it's just that first step that they need to shoot them to all the way to the end.
Yeah, I love that. I love that acknowledgement. It's a beautiful thing to leave people on because exactly, it's not linear. The progress isn't linear. Do not be discouraged if you feel like you're brand new to this. I've had so many brand new people come into my orbit over the last year that I'm like, you're not new at this. You just think you are. Just in the human timeline, you feel like you are, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I was telling my girlfriend. I was like, I am just on like a rapid pace of awakening that I just can't really explain. And it's, some people, they get frustrated that they're not like, why can't I be telepathic? Why can't I get this? Why can't I get that? It's like, well, you're just not ready for it yet. And once you are ready for it, you'll get it. So don't be frustrated at what you don't have. Look at what you do have. That's the first step, is that'll make you have other things, is once you acknowledge what you do have.
100%.
All right. Well, I'm going to stop the recording here. If you want to hang on for a minute afterwards, um, I want to say goodbye to our audience. Thank you all so much for coming out, and we will talk to you later.